Hi, everybody. Ellen, are you at your computer right now? I can see your name. Or Chris, I'm just wondering how long, the agenda didn't specify how long you're hoping my presentation would be, but do you have a goal or a limit?
So I think we have a fairly quick and not very complex agenda this month in terms of the items on the agenda.
Okay.
I think if you wanted to take a 15-minute presentation, that would be fine, or shorter, or what would you like to do?
No, in the spirit of your meeting, I think quick and not too complicated sounds perfect, but I will, I think I have some pretty fun stuff to share. So I'll share what I've got, and I think it will be 15 minutes or less. I'll try not to be too wordy.
Well, if it's fun, take your time and share away.
Okay.
There doesn't seem to be much of that in the world right now.
No, there does not.
You have at it. Make everybody happy.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll defer to Carl or Nancy or other board members on that if you would like something quicker.
There's no smoke in the air, so if anybody wants to just get out and be outside as fast as possible, I won't blame you.
The timing sounds fine to me.
Yeah, I just closed my door into my cave and looked down the hall and it looks gorgeous outside. I'm sorry I did that.
In fact, out my window, it does look a little hazy down the Bitterroot.
Thanks, that makes me feel better.
Morning, Carl.
Good morning.
Hey, Carl.
Hello.
So Jill and Leslie, does everything look good and sound good?
Everything sounds good from my perspective. Did the board have a preference on the display of the meeting? Do you want tiles or do you want just the main speaker to be the big tile?
I like the tiles.
Like, here's the other option. Are we expecting Doug Harvey?
Yes, for Todd's project.
Thank you. Because he's in. I'm a little trigger happy with the admit. Ding, admit, ding, admit.
I think Chris Anderson is probably joining us as well.
Yep, he accepted my invite, so he should be coming.
Okay.
Who's Doug with now? WGM?
Yep.
Thank you. So Doug's raising his hand. Now what do I do? What's that mean?
It means you should mute him. You're supposed to let him talk.
Doug, can you hear us?
Looks like he left.
He's there.
He's here. He went from words to a picture. Can you hear us, Doug?
I think he did leave.
Hey, Doug, can you hear me now?
Hi, Doug.
Apparently not.
It's noon, so what do we want to do? We want to figure out Doug's problem? Or should we get started?
Doug, can you hear us?
Looks like he's connecting again.
Okay, yeah, his little dots are moving there.
Pat, do you have a cell phone number where you can reach him to tell him something's up?
Oh, look.
Looks like he's working from home.
Looks like he's got slow internet at home.
Ellen, are we expecting anybody else?
Chris Anderson.
I'll just shoot him an email. I don't have a,
Nope, now he's no longer working. Doug, can you hear us? Doug? Wave or something? Connecting again. Well, what do you want to do? I say we get started and
I think we get started.
I think we'll be okay if he can't join in. He's here for the sidewalk RFP.
now he's in, but he's muted. Doug, can you hear us? You're muted.
Okay, am I still
There
muted?
he is.
Yeehaw.
Here we go. All right.
All right.
Well, it's 12:01 and this is the regular meeting of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. We have obviously we're doing this over Zoom, so people who want to participate can call in. Jill, will you make sure people have the numbers to be able to do that? All right. And with that, there's about a 50-second delay, so we'll have a minute or two between the time we ask for public comment and when we actually close it. But with that, we'll call the meeting to order and begin by having people identify themselves. I'm Carl England, MRA Board.
Yancy Mo, MRA Board.
Ruth Reineking, MRA Board.
Tasha Jones, MRA Board.
Melanie Brock, MRA Board.
Chris Bean, MRA staff.
Todd Gass, MRA staff.
Leslie Pugh, MRA staff.
Annette Marchessault, MRA staff.
Jill Dunn, MRA staff.
Ellen Buchanan, MRA staff.
Doug, you still with us?
Doug Harvey, WGM.
Okay. With this view, I can't tell. Did everyone identify themselves? Okay. Then we have some minutes from the August 24th board meeting. Those of you who were in attendance, I wasn't, do you have any additions or corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Okay,
I'll second it.
all right. Mel, you seconded? Okay, all right. Any further discussion, comments, anything? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. The motion passes unanimously. Any public or comments or announcements of matters within the board's jurisdiction that aren't on the action item agenda? Anything from anybody? Hearing none. Erd 3 Inez First and Second Street Sidewalk Project. Todd, this is yours.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. All right, well, last month, the board authorized staff to issue an RFP for the ERD2 and as first and second sidewalk project, which we advertised that and received 4 proposals from local firms. A selection committee consisting of MRA staff and city personnel reviewed and ranked those and is recommending WGM Group as the project engineer. They seem to demonstrate a superior understanding of the project area, probably mostly due to the previous work they had done related to the California Street design project. And we have quite a history working with WGM on previous sidewalk projects and WGM with the city on public infrastructure projects. So they have a good team put in place for this project. I want to share my screen here. So we have some graphics to look at. Can I stop your screen, Jill? I think that's yours. Okay, let's see.
Todd, let me interrupt just for a second. I am getting text messages that the city's live stream is not up. So I think we're all right because we got Zoom and webcat or MCAT going, but if you don't see me, I gotta troubleshoot this. So go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Jill.
Here we go. Okay, so can everybody see that okay on the screen? We're looking at the project area for the sidewalk project. Staff worked with WGM to develop a scope of services and what we're calling the base area. So let me run through this. The base area on this project and the scope of services is the 2nd Street, Inez Street, and 1st Street in this area. And we'll talk about this leg of 2nd Street here in a minute. So we developed the scope of services for this base area, pretty much your typical sidewalk project. We have a public process built into that with several mailings to the project property owners within the project area, a public open house, and one-on-one meetings so we can work directly with property owners on mitigating encroachments in the right of way and design issues. And that scope of service covers the usual things through easement acquisition. We generally run into some easement acquisitions as we work through the design. It'll take us through preliminary final design, bidding services, and contract administration services through project closeout. And the budget that was set for that base area is $112,458. And that's kind of about what we have been seeing as far as I think that's kind of in the middle of what, if we look at a professional service fee percentage compared to the construction cost, we're kind of right about in the middle of what we've been seeing the last few years, and that's about 25%. So that's the base area. We also, in the scope of services, had them break out a separate piece here called the alternative phase 1 of the scope of services. What the WGM identified in their proposal is that 2nd Street between Inez Street and Dakota Street does not exist in a right-of-way. And what we want to do in this alternative phase 1 is work to acquire right-of-way and this leg of project here, working with the property owners. It'll also take us through design of 2nd Street between 1st and 2nd here, which is part of the sidewalk project. Fortunately, this is quite a length of road here. Fortunately, we're only dealing with 3 property owners through here. The majority of that being the city of Missoula. And we also have the Housing Authority and Missoula Irrigation District owns a few parcels through here. So this phase is to enter into discussions to acquire right-of-way for 2nd Street. And I talk about in my staff report that if that work is able to proceed on a timeline that is consistent or goes along with the timeline of the base area, then we will include the construction of a 2nd Street in the current sidewalk project. And if it doesn't, we'll simply drop this leg of 2nd Street out of the current sidewalk project, and we'll continue with the right-of-way acquisition talks and get the design for 2nd Street through here, and we can pick up that piece of work then in a future sidewalk project. And so, but we want to kind of get this cleaned up for the 2nd Street right away as that alternative phase 1 that has a budget set for $17,624. And so staff is recommending today that the board move to approve the professional services agreement and scope of services, including the alternative phase 1 with WGM Group for the design, engineering, public outreach, easement, right-of-way acquisition, and contract administration related to the ERD2 Inez 1st and 2nd Street sidewalk project for a cost not to exceed $130,082, and authorize the board chairman to sign the agreement. And be happy to answer any questions. Doug Harvey is here from WGM Group. Stephen and Cody had some previous engagements today, so they couldn't make the meeting today. Stephen and Cody are the engineers and project manager for WGM Group. And Doug's also the project manager for WGM Group, so he can answer any questions too.
Questions?
Oh, I'm going to show you. There.
Anybody?
One thing, Todd, excuse me, you need to mention the east end of 2nd also as your base.
Correct.
Cul-de-sac.
Yeah, that's the east end of 2nd Street here, just east of Oak Street. This was a piece of, we were going to do this sidewalk construction this past summer. And that we deferred constructing that because the owner on the north side of the cul-de-sac here, they're working on some redevelopment of this property here. He had petitioned the city to vacate a portion of the right-of-way here, and that came about just about the time we were designing the project. So that was not happening on a timeline. That was working with the rest of it, with the overall design and construction of the project on 2nd Street. So we dropped that piece off last year. I had talked to the owner last week. Mike Morgan is developing that. He's the architect here. He indicated that they ended up dropping their vacation request from the city. I guess it became too complicated and they weren't agreeable to what was some of the conditions that were placed on that. So that dropped out. So I'm planning on trying to pick that up again this year. Part of that, what we wanted to get was a sidewalk easement acquisition. Excuse me. Got a dog whining to go outside. Where was I? Yeah, we want to see if we could get an easement to access the trail from the end of the cul-de-sac here. That would have been a condition as part of the vacation conditions. And now that that has dropped out, we will have to approach that owner and see if they are amenable to still granting the trail easement through here, whether or not that's something that the city wants or not. I know in discussion, part of what was discussed was Parks was requesting, City Parks was requesting a 20-foot wide easement through here. And I think with that width of an easement, it took away too much of the parking that they were hoping to develop here. So things didn't quite line up like they were hoping. We will follow through if whether or not that's something that the neighborhood and the city want. If so, we will try to pursue that and see if we can acquire that, working with this property owner on the north and south side here. So that at this point is part of the base area. And there's the long explanation.
Okay, anything from anybody? Questions, Nancy?
What's the timeline on the work to start construction?
Well, we hope to bid it early to mid-February, sometime in February, bid it. And I think we'd like to, if we can give the contractor some flexibility on a start date, I think bidding that early, we would be ready to go right away in the spring. Or if we can get a better bid by allowing them flexibility to start, May, June, or even July, if that brings us a better bid, we're open to that. The goal is to be done, constructed by the end of the construction season, by October. I'd like to have it done by the end of September. It's probably a 60-day contract, so a 2-month building period. We could probably start as late as July if we wanted to, if that works for our advantage as far as the construction price.
Thank you.
Any, Ruth?
What is the status of the curbs and et cetera on Second Street in between Inez and Oak? Has that been completed? Is that why there's, you have Second Street on the left of that other?
Yeah, let me back up. We did that. That was this year.
Okay.
Second Street between Inez and Oak. This stretch here, is that what you're talking about, Ruth?
Yes.
Yeah, we did that this summer. That's complete.
Okay.
Looks nice. Go out and check it out.
Thank you. Yeah, I will. I was going to go for a bike ride this afternoon because it is blue sky. So
Yeah. Yeah, I like how the retaining wall that we did on this end here looks real good. The end down through here looks really nice with the boulevard sidewalk that went in, and we saved these large maple trees here. So that was a success.
Okay, anything else from anybody? If not, Todd, would you stop sharing your screen?
Sure. Yeah.
And Jill, maybe you can bring up the numbers in case somebody wants to comment, because I think it's time for a motion. Is there one, please?
Sorry, I'm back. Just had IT over here. Carl, I'm sorry. Can you just say what you just said? What do you need me to do?
I need you to put up the numbers because I think we're going to get a motion on this one.
Okay. I think we're up and running on the city's feed now, so we should be good.
Okay.
Can everybody see the numbers? Okay.
Yes.
We can, but we don't have a motion yet.
this is Ruth. I'll move to approve the staff recommendation. Are we still reading those?
Yes, please, Ruth.
Okay. Then I move to approve the professional services agreement and scope of services, including alternative phase 01 with WGM Group for design, engineering, public outreach, easement, and right-of-way acquisition and contract administration related to the ERD2 Inez First and Second Street Sidewalk Project for a cost not to exceed $130,082 and authorize the board chair to sign the agreement.
Okay.
Second.
Mel, was that you?
Tasha.
Oh, Tasha, I'm sorry. I don't have all the picture, all right, it's moved and seconded. Any further comment? We'll take public comment now, so people can call in if they have public comment, and we'll give it a minute here.
I started the timer, Carl. 3 minutes.
Okay, in the meantime, Doug, you gonna do a dance for us or something?
Yeah,
Oh, please don't. That was only a joke, Doug.
if you saw me dance, you'd be laughing.
Any interest, Joe?
Not yet.
Okay. All right, well, people have had opportunity to call in. So with that, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Joe, take down the public comment information. Please get us back to where we can see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next item is South Reserve Street pedestrian bridge heating panels. Ellen?
Yeah, Ellen Buchanan. Since we built the South Reserve pedestrian bridge, we have had issues in the winter months when it's colder with the heating panels functioning properly to not only melt, but also evacuate the moisture from the bridge surface during inclement weather. You might remember we made the decision to go with a composite panel for a couple of reasons, not the least of which was the weight issue of that versus concrete decking on that bridge saved a lot of time and money because of the difference in weight with those composite panels as opposed to concrete. Amount of steel was reduced, and you might remember availability of steel wasn't great during that period of time, but the system has turned out to be a really good system and everybody's happy with it, but we have a programming issue, it appears, with the panels. It's not a manufacturing issue, but it's the design of the programming for the heating cycles. Parks and Rec reached out to Anchor Electric / Anchor Controls, I think it was last year, to look at the system and make some recommendations as to modifications that could be implemented to try to correct the problem. Anchor has come back with a proposal that is in the simplest of terms, a two-part proposal. One piece of it addresses those items that we believe are deficient in terms of the design of the system and its inability to meet the specifications that were a part of Jackson's construction contract. There's also a piece of it that's actually an enhancement to that programming effort that makes it more efficient for Parks and Rec to operate the system and be more responsive in a more immediate fashion. The total cost of the proposal is just over $30,000, and roughly it almost splits exactly half and half between what's needed to provide the system that was specified versus those proposals that would upgrade the system to make it more efficient to operate. We have sent a demand letter. We've had a lot of negotiation with Jackson, and I want to say that Jackson Contractor Group has been extremely cooperative and is working hard to help us resolve this situation. I think they recognize that the system is not working as anticipated or specified, and they are working with their subcontractor. The thing that's a little bit different about this situation as opposed to your typical well, straightforward construction project is that the specifications actually required the panel manufacturer and supplier to provide the system that would operate those panels. Once again, Missoula was a bit of a guinea pig. This was the first time this system had been used. And we're confident that if we make these modifications, then it will not only melt the snow and the frost, but will also carry the moisture off of the bridge so that it doesn't refreeze. That's been the primary issue with the system is it does melt the snow, but it doesn't stay melted long enough to get it into the gutter and downspout system to get it off of the roadway. So it refreezes and we have a liability issue on our hands. So as some of you might have noticed last week, we are now facing cold weather. We've already had one frost, and we need to get this done in a timely fashion so that we don't have to have this issue continue through yet another winter and have the city carry that liability. So what we've done, excuse me, what we've done is we've sent Jackson Contractor Group what's called a demand letter, which puts them on notice that we expect them to do what's necessary to make this system functional. They have gone to their subcontractor, Composite Advantage, because it was Composite who actually designed and manufactured and installed the system, including the programming and software was per their design. What I am proposing today is that MRA board approve an allocation of the entire amount needed for both the improvements that are necessary to meet specifications, which we expect to get reimbursed from Jackson Contractor Group, and then the upgrades to the system of $14,900, which will allow Parks and Rec to operate it much more efficiently and in fact save the city money by doing so. So at the end of the day, what we're asking is that MRA board approve an allocation of $30,150 with the expectation that we will be reimbursed $15,250 of that from Jackson or by Jackson for those modifications, and MRA will pay for the upgrades that are deemed to be necessary for more efficient operation of this system. Chris Anderson is here with DJ&A. They were the firm that designed the bridge and oversaw the construction, managed the construction when it was being built by Jackson. And Chris may have something to add or can answer questions. We have been assured by Parks that if we make these modifications, because these were in fact, these are the modifications that Parks is recommending. So if we get these modifications made and there's still issues, it is no longer an MRA issue. It's a Parks and Recreation issue. The other piece of this is that we're proposing that since Parks entered into the agreement with Anchor, that this will be a contract between Missoula Parks and Recreation and Anchor Electric, and that MRA will simply pay for the work that will be done under that contract.
Chris, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Ellen summarized it really well. I'm available to answer any technical questions or questions about the bridge heating system. Happy to dive into that if anybody has questions about that.
Okay, thanks. Questions? So I'll start if no one wants to start. The issue does not appear to be with the panels themselves, but rather the operating system. How comfortable are you, Chris, that this solves the problem?
You know, we haven't had a chance to really evaluate the proposal on a technical level that Parks has put together. Anchor was actually the original programmer of the system. So nobody's more familiar with it than Anchor. It was a contractor designed system. So in other words, Composite Advantage, who is the panel supplier, they designed the system, they designed the programming, and then they subcontracted to what used to be ABC Controls, which is now Anchor, to implement the system. So if there's anybody that is in a position to fix the system, it's Anchor, in my opinion. So again, we haven't had the ability to really dive in and look at the technical aspect of what they're proposing. but at least on the cover, it looks like it's going to solve their issues. And Anchor is standing by it, saying that they're confident that it's going to create a system that's going to allow them to operate it more efficiently. And that's the real issue. Is it's, you know, the panels are heating just fine. They're melting snow. And the problem is with the programming, the zone is not heating for a long enough duration to not only melt the snow, but to convey it off the bridge. So Anchor's confident that with the electric service that's available at the bridge, that they're going to be able to successfully convey the water off the bridge after it melts. So.
Okay. Nancy.
It appears to me that this, that the deal has been done and we're just being asked to fund about 50% of it. That's the way it looks to me, because we're not going to be a party and we're not substituting for anybody. And there's a release of Jackson Contracting Group that appears to me to, that the timing of, that the release of Jackson Contracting should be considered, I guess, by Parks and Rec, not by us, because Jackson is being released from liability before they make any payment. And I did have a question about the guarantee of the Anchor work, but because we're not participating, I guess that's a question for Parks and Rec to be satisfied with. It looks like we're just being asked. I question that $30,000 needs to be paid now, except to get this done right away. And our obligation is the 14, we're being asked to assume the obligation of the $14,000 amount.
I think that's an accurate.
If I have a question in there, maybe Ellen could comment on how this came about, or if I'm looking at this correctly.
Well, I think that's a fairly accurate assessment of the situation. We do have assurances. We did ask Anchor, not Anchor, I'm sorry. We did ask Composite Advantage for an extended warranty on the panels, because this was a system that had not been previously used with these particular panels becoming also heating units. We have an extended warranty. They have said that the modifications that are being proposed will not void that warranty. So Park still is going to have a 5 years, Chris? I think a 5-year warranty, 10-year warranty on those panels. So that stays intact. What MRA is being asked to fund at the end of the day is the enhancements to the system that, as it's gone into operation, Parks has determined that if they can operate this system remotely, which these upgrades will allow them to do, and that was not part of the original specification, is not something that Jackson was obligated or expected to provide. But if they can operate this system remotely, it's going to increase the efficiency of their internal operations considerably. And staff is recommending that MRA pay for that. That's true. We are not indicating that MRA should pay for the upgrades that
contract to Anchor to complete to go forward with this, so that it can be done before the bridge freezes, and it has to be controlled manually or physically.
Well, I think one thing that I did not mention, this is warranty work. So the warranty on this bridge has expired, with the exception of the contract on those panels. So it's a little bit different than if we were doing this right after construction had been completed. These discussions have been ongoing the entire life of the bridge. The urgency right now obviously is winter coming on. The way I read the demand letter, Jackson is not relieved, and you may want to jump in here, Chris, but Jackson would not be relieved of responsibility until 60 days after we have received the reimbursement for them, from them. For
That's what I understood, Ellen, is that the release of Jackson occurs because Jackson is not party to the solution. They're simply asked to pay the fee, if you will, for coming up with the solution or correcting the problem. Jackson has not been, this isn't running through Jackson. This was Parks. They came up with a solution that they felt was going to work. Jackson has not necessarily bought off on that. I think they agree with it in concept, but it's that's why Jackson, I believe, is being released from further liability associated with the operating system of the bridge. That's what I understood.
that was the intent of the demand letter. Yes. And it
So
was,
is there an agreement then by them that they're going to reimburse this amount? Or are you just hoping that that will happen?
well, the demand letter requires that they reimburse us for that amount of money. If they don't, then I would imagine that the next step is either mediation, arbitration, or you go to court. They were legally bound to provide us with a system that did certain things. It is not performing today. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, certainly the intent of the system was not achieved with the original design and construction of the panels. So yeah, and that's the purpose of the demand letter. And back to what Ellen said previously about Jackson cooperating, I think Jackson understands the situation. They have been cooperative thus far and have been trying to work through what I would characterize as a very difficult subconsultant, and Composite Advantage. Composite has been challenging to work with, and Jackson is doing its best to recoup the fees. But Jackson understands they're the prime contractor, and ultimately everything falls under their responsibility. So I think your question, Tasha, was with respect to the guarantee of payment. And while there is no guarantee right now, I would say that the payment forthcoming from Jackson is, I would be very optimistic that that's going to happen in one way, shape, or form.
Is this,
Okay, oh, go ahead, Nancy.
is this a situation that the city attorney needs to review or did review?
He did review the demand letter. He understands the situation and he understands how we're progressing.
Does Jackson need to, Chris, to your understanding, does Jackson need to buy off on the fix before they spend the money? Is that the hang up?
I think the challenge is they're probably not qualified to even really evaluate the fix. I mean, it's a fairly complex control system, and they would probably be going to Anchor anyway to perform that type of an analysis, or Composite Advantage, which hasn't been very cooperative. So I think at this point, Parks feels that this is the answer. This is what they need to have efficient operation of their bridge. And Jackson is more or less saying that's fine, and will, if they choose to pay the $15,200 and change, they would ask for a release, as they're not going to have any control over Anchor and Anchor's work, if that makes sense. So for them to, they're essentially going to be cutting a check for Anchor to be performing that work, and without their supervision and their buy off on that, then it's hard to place any additional liability on them for further issues with the bridge.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, MRA will pay for, if this is approved, MRA will pay for this work to be done. we will be reimbursed by Jackson Contractor Group in the amount of $15,250. We will absorb the balance, which is 14,900.
I understand that. My question is, are we reimbursed? So two questions. A, are we being reimbursed by Jackson or are we being reimbursed by Parks?
We're being reimbursed by Jackson.
So if Jackson doesn't do it, then are we buying ourselves the litigation to get it?
Well, the contract is between the city and Jackson, between MRA and Jackson Contractor Group, not between Parks and Jackson. So the original contract that had
Okay,
not been
so we're staying for that.
we're in. I mean, and that contract has not been satisfied with respect to the operation of the heating panels on the bridge.
So that makes sense. And then what we're doing is we're relying on Parks to say that this is a fix that'll work.
That's correct. And to say that if this fix doesn't work, it's our problem. And that will be part of the memorandum of understanding between MRA and Parks in order for us to convey the money to them to get this work done by Anchor.
It's our problem or their problem?
It becomes their problem if this fix does not work. They went out and they worked with Anchor. They helped design the fix. They're confident that the fix is going to meet their needs, and responsibility shifts from MRA to Parks once this work's done. And that's been confirmed by both Donna Gockler and Dave Selvage in writing, to the degree that emails are confirmation in writing. It will, as I said, it will be part of the memorandum of understanding or the contract between MRA and Parks that transfers the funding to them to get this work done.
Okay. Other
Oh,
questions?
Yeah, I have one more. The original agreement with Parks was that they would maintain the bridge upon completion, and there was not going to be a remote option. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, the intent from the beginning is that once the bridge was built, it becomes part of the part of the trail system of the city, and it belongs to the Parks and Rec, belongs to the city under the management and maintenance of Parks and Recreation. Yes.
And so the additional 15,000 that's separate from the reimbursement issue with Jackson is to allow Parks to be able to operate this system remotely.
That's a big part of it. Yes, that's the bulk of it.
Okay, and tell me why that should be MRA's money to spend rather than Parks deciding to use their budget to make their agreed maintenance of the bridge more efficient for them.
You know, I'm going to thread a needle here. As this system was being designed, I'm not sure any of us were in a position to have well, I know none of us were in a position to have operated or maintained or managed a system of this nature in the past. One of the things that is unique about the bridge over South Reserve Street is that bridge crosses over MDT right away, an MDT highway, if you will. One of the conditions of being allowed to even build that bridge was that we had to remove snow in a fashion that had no impact on the street below. Thus, the heating system and the gutter system and the downspout system. I mean, gutters and downspouts on a bridge are, I would argue, not necessarily standard operating procedure, but because of the conditions that we had to live with in order to even be able to have this trail over the bridge, that we had to design a system to take care of that. And I think you could argue that MRA has no obligation to assist Parks in making the operation of this bridge more efficient. Parks does not have the funding to do that. I think everybody knows that Parks is notoriously underfunded when it comes to maintenance, whether it's mowing grass or getting water off of a bridge. It's the nature of the beast in every city I've ever worked in. So I think you could argue that we have no obligation to pay for that upgrade, but I feel like it's not an unreasonable request from the Parks Department to make this bridge operation as efficient as we can. And it would have been wonderful if it had been designed to do that to start with. It wasn't. We would have paid for it if it had been part of the original design, as we paid for the cost of building the bridge. So I don't have a problem recommending that we spend the extra $15,000. But that's the board's decision. That's simply staff recommendation.
The other piece of that is that the permission from the Department of Transportation, the board that oversaw the Department of Transportation, that we needed to get that permission. That was difficult to get. So the conditions that were placed on here were, I don't know if they're standard or not, but given the fact that it was touch and go to even get the permission, we certainly accepted these and weren't really in a position to argue a whole lot with these, since it was, as I say, touch and go whether they were going to give us permission in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back in history a little bit, this aspect of achieving, permission from MDT to have the bridge there pales into comparison to the cost of having to design and construct that bridge in a way that the whole center section can be removed in the event that an oversized or mega load needs to come up Reserve Street. I think if I remember correctly, that was somewhere between a $100,000 and $200,000 upgrade to that bridge that frankly doesn't exist on any other bridge in the state of Montana that we're aware of that might have a large load want to go under it. So Carl's right. I mean, it was challenging at best to even get permission to build this.
Okay, any Ruth?
Yeah, just from a big picture look, I think that if we get reimbursed by Jackson for the 15,000 and what we're putting in is 15,000 for an upgrade to the controls, and then it improves the safety issue of the bridge, I think that's worth 15,000, whether it's strictly our liability or not. So I'm in favor of this proposal.
And I'd simply add to that, the other piece of it is that thanks to, I know in large part thanks to Chris's work, this was a pretty smooth project. Difficult project, a new project, and a pretty smooth one. So, this would have come up as a change order in the middle of the thing, we would have been delighted that this was the only change order. So things went smoothly. So I'm with you, Ruth.
And it's a huge asset to our trail system and those neighborhoods that can now go to Fort Missoula Regional Park safely.
Hey, well, if I could get Jill to put up the numbers so that we could hear any public comment, unless there's other comments anybody has to make. Is there a motion?
Well, this is Ruth. I'll move that the MRA board approve an expenditure of up to $30,150 for the City Parks Department to use to contract for improvements to the deck heating operating system on the South Reserve Street pedestrian bridge, also known as the Midtown Bridge, with the understanding that staff will continue to work with Jackson Contractor Group for reimbursement of $15,250 for modifications required to meet the heating specifications for the bridge panels, and further authorize the MRA staff to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the City Parks Department.
Is there a second?
I could second.
Okay, Mel second. Okay, we'll take public comment. Anybody wants to call in, and does anybody on the board or anybody present have anything more to add?
Maybe while we wait for public comment, did I just hear Ruth name the bridge? Is that a new name? I've never heard of it referred to as the Midtown Bridge before.
The Midtown Association wanted it to be known as the Midtown Bridge.
I like it.
It has a more of a ring, you know, than the South Reserve Street pedestrian bridge.
I agree. That's a mouthful. Midtown Bridge, I like it. Maybe take that up, Carl, as your next voting item. Name the bridge.
I don't think that's within our purview.
Right, it's not on the agenda, Chris. We follow the rules here.
Fair enough.
It was also known as, you know, by some people, it is known as.
By some Midtown people.
Yeah.
That's right.
We won't need to go into what else it might be known as. Chris, how else do you think it's working?
It's been working splendidly, and even the bridge itself, I mean, even the heating panels, I mean, they heat great. They melt snow, and it's just the issue with the operating system is a little bit unfortunate, but yeah, I think everything else, it's been weathering well. Its overall performance of the bridge has been exactly what we were hoping, so.
Okay. Well, that's good. We'll get
I will vote in favor of the motion also, but my objection was to giving a waiver of liability to Jackson Construction Group without them having to do anything apparently to obtain that waiver. The big picture argument, of course, gets me.
Carl, this is Jill. That's been 3 minutes.
Okay. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. Chris, it's nice to see you again. You know you're welcome to stay, but you don't have to. So
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, no, I appreciate you inviting me, and hope we get this all resolved and back to business. So.
all right. Okay, so moving to non-action items, Grant. There you are.
I'm back. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to join today, Ellen. Excited to have a chance to give you an update on what we've been doing with our Opportunity Zone work. I should confirm you can hear me since I switched headsets. Is that true? Okay,
We
great.
can hear you.
So the last time MEP came in to give you an update on this project was in February. Feels like 100 years ago that it was February, but Julie Lacey, our Economic Development Director, came in and gave you a brief update, kind of a summary of the work accomplished up through the February date. And just a reminder of the kind of goals of the grant that you awarded to us. We were setting out to increase Missoula's knowledge and understanding of our Opportunity Zone, developing local expertise and sharing the expertise that we could develop with the community and stakeholders as interest was shared with us, to identify models for public and private investment to achieve community goals through the Opportunity Zone tool, and also in Opportunity Zones in terms of the kind of development we could see. And then third, to encourage private investment in our Opportunity Zone that would follow those models or develop the kinds of facilities or infrastructure that we were hoping to see as we learned what the community was interested in, what this tool could achieve. Things changed pretty dramatically in March, and we've kind of had to, like the rest of the world, adapt and retool since COVID started. So I'll talk a little bit about what we've done since we saw you in February and kind of our new approach, and then specifically kind of finish up with some of our accomplishments, recent accomplishments, and kind of where we stand today, and a timeline of what we think is realistic on the horizon here. Since COVID, we've continued to track changes to the Opportunity Zone regulation and tool. On the policy side, that's mostly resulted in changes in deadline extensions for when investments could be made into an opportunity zone, still realizing the bulk of the financial gain. That extension has been provided through December 31st of this year. So there was a pretty big deadline of getting an investment made into a zone. That's extended to December 31st. I'll talk more about that later when I talk about our timeline and next steps. We've also been tracking practices. What are the changes and trends in the ways that the tool has been utilized across the country and in the region? What's the appetite of investors? And are we seeing specifically models migrate towards more complexity? And by that, I mean, in the early days, this has only been around for about 18 months, but in the very initial stages of the opportunity zone, what we are really seeing is investors, like single investor, single project, and the tool is used as a tax advantage for that particular investment in a project. We were also seeing primarily projects only being done that had been kind of on the books before the tool was developed. So we weren't seeing new and innovative projects responding to this tool. We were just seeing people use this as a way to add a little bit of extra leverage in their capital stack. We had hoped, and we were just starting to see around winter, a little bit more sophistication, a little bit more complex deals. Frankly, what we have learned probably just in the last 6 weeks or so is that a lot of that increased sophistication and complexity is kind of getting squelched again. And I'll talk a little bit about that on the deadline of that December 31st date. Or maybe I'll just share this now. You know, what we've been hearing recently is that some of the tempered enthusiasm for the tool and lack of complexity is fundamentally about the upcoming election and some sense from the Biden administration that if they were to win the White House, that in all likelihood, they would do what they could to dismantle this tool as a primary means of investing in underdeveloped communities, looking at different strategies and plans. So I think there's been a lot of uncertainty around people trying to develop whole new models and longer term plans around how to do this. As a result of kind of that mix of information, we've kind of adapted our thinking right now and really tried to expand our thinking around how do we use the opportunity zone we have and the momentum we have, but also how do we expand our thinking around how to use the momentum that we've created to do other things. So realizing that opportunity zones are a relatively small additional incentive anyway, but have been a powerful tool for sort of catalyzing focus. We've really tried to focus on some of the ancillary benefits that we've already realized in the opportunity zone. And specifically what we've heard from investors who even remain interested in opportunity zones is the tool is nice, but one of the things that they like most about the tool is it's created what we've seen in Missoula and what we've done here. It's forced communities to get really serious and focused around the places they want to invest. And that level of seriousness where we've seen cities, redevelopment agencies, private sector and public sector start to say, here are our goals and our priorities, and here's our timelines, and here are the things we're setting out to do, has actually given some larger investors a lot more confidence that they have a predictable pathway to developing projects where they might otherwise run into a lot of hurdles and challenges with regulatory frameworks or a lack of cooperation from the city or a regulatory body, or frankly, just a community voice that is in opposition to the kinds of development that we're trying to do. We've also realized that in the process of talking to some investors, we've elected to sort of expand our thinking around the exact geography of the way that we're doing our work. And by that, I mean, we've extended our conversations and our thinking and what we're promoting beyond just the opportunity zone to now include the former library block, and also with the recent changes at the Riverfront Triangle, we've included that parcel and that project as a piece to showcase to potential investors and developers who are showing an interest in Missoula. Additionally, just in the last few months, because of the progress that's been made through the city, we've added the Scott Street as a specific site that we're investing in, both in resources and understanding, but also in promotion. And then the West Broadway and Sleepy Inn. And when I get to the accomplishments, I'll talk about what that additional focus looks like. And then, you know, another big change, which probably sounds obvious, is we had two final events that we had proposed to do within the context of our grant. One was a developer showcase where we were going to bring investors out and do something like a tour of various sites, meeting either elected officials, firms in town if we had out-of-town developers, or folks who might be able to assist people with their projects in town, and just give people an understanding of what these places were, a chance to kick the tires and see what else was happening in our community outside the boundaries of specific sites, so they could get a sense of the potential and opportunity to invest here. We have abandoned the showcase. Obviously, our goal was to do that in June. Having people come to Missoula was pretty much out of the question. Having people congregate in places was out of the question. So we've really shifted gears to what I actually would argue is probably looking like our more viable pathway to make progress on some of these goals anyway, which is old-fashioned word-of-mouth networking, person-to-person networking, and starting to just look around very strategically for the kinds of people who are investing in the projects that we might want to see, or we're hearing we want to see more of in Missoula. So that's a nice place to pivot to some of our specific accomplishments that have happened since we visited with you last. Sort of thanks to that expanding, we've been trying to bring some of our other tools in our toolbox to the table to support some of these projects. So we secured the $25,000 grant to do planning at the library block. And it's a matching grant for the MRA to expand their planning around what the community would like to see there, what opportunities there are there. We've also just submitted a grant for another $25,000 for the West Broadway corridor and for Sleepy Inn. We've also been looking at how we can leverage our business expansion and job creation grants to support opportunity zones. And so one of the things we did is we had been working with an opportunity zone investor who was looking at real estate. They ended up acquiring a building that had tenants in the building who had a local business. That local business had some potential to expand. So because of that opportunity, we were able to sit down with that business and identify their potential for a job creation grant through the Big Sky Trust Fund. So sort of thanks to this networking, we were able to apply, and we were awarded on behalf of this company a $25,000 grant to create 5 new jobs for a business that's operating in the opportunity zone. We've also been assessing our online marketing tools. So one of the, while we're not having a developer showcase, we do know that we're going to need to find ways to promote some of these project opportunities in the private sector and to the private sector for strong partnerships with MRA and the city to develop around some of their goals. We looked at something called the Opportunity Exchange. It's a very specific tool online that allows communities to showcase opportunity zone projects that they're committed to furthering. Based on what we've kind of learned and our feeling and thoughts about the timeline and what I shared about our desire to kind of expand our thinking and not limit it exclusively to the opportunity zone geography or tool, we've decided to, we're going to be making an investment in the next probably 6 or 8 weeks to redevelop our new website, to have a component of our website that actually showcases the properties that we've reached agreement on with the city and MRA to try to really promote. So our website will become the primary vehicle for the online presence for some of our marketing work. And then, and we're really counting on populating that with information that comes from these planning grants that we have, but also from existing planning documentation and some of the funding that you've already provided. So we've initiated a site evaluation and utility and infrastructure evaluation for the Scott Street site right now. Basically, it's pretty clear from the community voices and headlines. What we really need to keep focused on right now is mixed use and housing that our workforce can afford. So knowing that some of the things that we've heard about from that community are sort of a pride in light industry, in maker spaces, in housing that people can afford, and the kinds of services that community is interested in. We started this process to understand what's possible there. Are some of the goals that we already know we have, things that can be achieved based on the infrastructure and site conditions, what would need to change. And the goal there is to be able to answer that first order set of questions of developers. If we're saying, please come check out this Scott Street site, there's some questions that they're asking of us just right off the bat that we want to be able to answer so that they know it's worth buying the ticket and coming into town, or if they're already here, starting to pull together their team of investors and get serious about investing dollars in some of the pre-work that they have to do to understand if this is a viable project for them. I think the most exciting news that I have to share is just one of, and I hope you'll forgive me for not sharing specifics, but for many of these folks, they have asked for continued confidentiality at this stage in the process. But we have met with several investors and developers, and one, I think, in large part to the work of your efforts and other work that the city has done, developers and investors here and also across the region and even the country are quite bullish on Missoula. We provided a presentation to a large Western US developer a couple of weeks ago, showing sort of some of the sites across the community that we were interested in, talking about the planning work and the downtown master plan, some of the investments that have been made and some of the vision for some of these places. And the exact quote that this developer shared with us is, "Missoula is a beacon of hope at a time where there isn't very much hope." It was really, I think, a profound realization from folks outside of our community that there's a lot happening here, that there's great work happening, and that this is a community that wasn't on the radar before that is starting to become on the radar. And this is a developer, maybe if there are public viewing this today, who's got a strong track record for doing projects of the scale of things like the Riverfront Triangle, and a strong track record of working with public agencies and communities to develop really exciting mixed use, both affordable and market rate housing projects in a scale that I think our community is desperately in need of. So really positive. We've also been talking to local developers and investors who have a strong proven track record and I think a reputation in this community for doing the kinds of projects that a lot of folks who I think are apprehensive about this tool will feel really, really good about, knowing that these investors and folks are behind them. So really promising work right now. And I think it puts us into a good position to be starting to do some work, really detailed work with the city and MRA staff to start talking about the specifics of what these sites could look like and what kinds of deal structures need to happen between the city, MRA, and these developers to get the kinds of accomplishments we want to see in these projects and that make them real wins for the community over the long term. In addition to those specific developers, we're all who are specifically, to whom we have really been pitching Scott Street, Library Block, and now Riverfront Triangle. There are additional developers who have been coming to us just knowing that we've been working on this project and expressed interest in other sites in the Opportunity Zone that I think have real potential to be victories for our community and really in keeping with the spirit of the kinds of development that the north side and west side have at least expressed to us they're interested in supporting. I talked a little bit about what we might do next going forward. This next step, I think, is, and we hope to do this in the next couple of weeks, sit down again with leadership at MRA and the city and talk specifics now about some of these sites and what kind of accommodations are the city and MRA are interested in making in partnership with developers to leverage some of these interests and goals. We have this looming deadline on December 31st, at which point, some of the investors that we know are interested in putting money into Missoula do specifically want to use the Opportunity Zone tool. And frankly, if we don't have a project site ready by December 31st to put money into a fund and meet the deadlines for some of the timing, we may miss that opportunity. So for us, that December 31st deadline is a real and an important deadline. And frankly, I think it's probably after which it's probably the most important time for us to come and check back in with you to just let you know where this has evolved and where things stand, and if we were able to really attract bigger investment into some of these projects. I hope that within the next sort of 6 weeks or so, we'll see our website get up to speed with some of the other sites that we're trying to promote. And I suspect we will have probably spent out the entirety of the grant or pretty close to it by the end of December. We, of course, have spent vastly more on our staff time than you granted for our work, but this work has become a kind of a core component of what we're doing at MEP, and it's just becoming a part of our general operations. So the additional portion of your grant that's for the sort of non-staff side of our work is the part that I expect to spend out sometime in the next probably 3 to 4 months. So that's sort of where things stand today, and I'm happy to take questions if there are any about where we are and where we're going. And more importantly, I'm really hoping we'll have real things to show, at least on paper and in principle, by year end.
Questions? Thank you, Grant. Questions? So I have one. The December 31st is the deadline to do what?
So I won't go into the deeper details, in part because I'll probably get them wrong, but essentially there are the opportunity zone benefit sort of phases down its total value to an investor over a time frame, a relatively short time frame, where the maximum value that a investor can get for the 10-year duration that they hold money in an opportunity zone starts to get scaled back. That first key threshold for when that phasing down starts to happen will be after December 31st. So my understanding is before December 31st, the benefit to the investor of putting money into a fund, and once it's in the fund, I think there's something like 180 days for that fund to be deployed into the zone in some form of turning dirt and making improvements. That first threshold will be December 31st. Once we get past that, the value of the incentive continues to be diminished, and the ease with which we can attract investors will continue to get more challenging.
But as of that date, they have to put cash in a fund. Is that what you're saying?
If you want to maximize the benefit, you'll have to have cash in a fund by that date. So what that means is we'll have to have created a compelling enough project that is real enough and secure enough that they're willing to put money into the fund and know that they won't be penalized.
Thank you. Other questions? You answered them all, Grant.
It's the easiest way to present.
That's right. Well,
I really do appreciate everybody's investment in us and patience with us. It was pretty alarming for many reasons going into COVID, but not least of which was just wondering what investment would look like in our community going forward, and if and when it would return, and how we would fulfill this grant. But I feel really optimistic right now that we will be able to do all of those things. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, Ellen, director's report.
Yeah, I guess there's really nothing to add to the items that are in the report that you received as part of this packet, other than I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any about any of the things that we talked about. And if not, Carl had asked that we do an update to the degree that we can with respect to Riverfront Triangle / Fox site in light of the recent changes that we've seen there in terms of players and investment. And I'm going to ask Chris to do that. But first, are there any questions about the items in the director's report?
Ruth.
Not a question, but I did want to say thanks to Mel for representing the board on the communications plan. And thank you to Carl for serving on the committee for the Scott Street redevelopment project. I appreciate that.
I think one comment, just to kind of echo some of what Grant was saying. I mean, if you look at this director's report, it's just a little microcosm of kind of some of the things that are whirling around and stirring in Missoula. So we're on the map. People are interested in Missoula. Maybe not everything we would want to see in the way of interest in Missoula, but they're interested in Missoula. And I think the money that we invested with MEP, although we could have never anticipated COVID, thank goodness, is as good an investment as we've made as an agency in a while. So time's right. I mean, I think we're kind of a hot commodity on a lot of fronts. And a lot of it, I think some of it anyway, is attributable to this board and decisions that this board has made over the years. And it's an honor to be a part of this, frankly.
Okay.
Chris, do you want to talk a little?
Tasha, wait a minute, Tasha.
I just would want to echo that, Ellen, and say that it seems that our commitment to having a focus on affordable housing is more important than ever right now. And so it seems that this is all interrelated and, stemming off of Grant's presentation and the opportunities for partnership in the areas that have been a focus. Now is a great time to have affordable housing be something that we should be looking very deeply at committing resources towards.
Okay. Anything else? If not, Chris, can you tell us where we are in Riverfront Triangle?
Well, I think as we all read a couple of weeks ago, Nick is not interested in continuing with his project, and it's the form that he thought it was going to be in, at least. As far as legal deadlines, we have a resolution of the city council that transferred or assigned or agreed to the assignment of signed executed agreements and amendments from the past. That carries forward. So really the next real hard deadline would be, which has an out, it would be November 22nd. They were supposed to, at that point, apply for a building permit with approved plans and drawings. The approval of the plans and drawings, although it didn't take quite the form as perhaps might have been thought of originally, certainly in the spring, Nick had several presentations, both in the public, well, all in the public, but to City Club, to MRA, and to the City Council, explaining and showing very detailed drawings of what he was doing. So I think the intent of the where we were headed with that is fine. The portion as far as application for permits starts out subject to unavoidable delay. I think that if there was ever an example of what the unavoidable delay might be, it might be a worldwide pandemic and shutting down the community. So I think that we have that in our, if we want to just sit back and take a wait and see. I think Grant's pointing out that there is interest in Missoula. We've heard of the interest in not just that site, but others. That might pick up, a lot of different kinds of things that we want to move forward to. Certainly, Nick set a very high bar, and I think that's fine. That we have a high bar to reach in terms of design and benefit to the community. If we want to move forward, over the next couple of months, the MRA also has at its discretion the ability to extend that deadline, that November 22nd, 2020 deadline, 6 months, should we want to do that and just stay with the current agreements the way they are. So I think there's lots of ways we can move forward with a lot of flexibility, and hopefully the private sector and what will have to be their private partners can be as creative as possible over the next while, and we'll see what happens. That's my take on it right now, is to not do anything drastic, not take any necessary measures until we absolutely have to, and see what Grant and a lot of other folks bring to us.
Well, what has been the situation in terms of Nick Chakota? Has he said he's done? Or is he saying I've just put it on hold indefinitely?
No, I think what he's made clear, both in the public and to Mayor and Ellen can speak obviously to this better than I can, that he's not interested in being the general developer for this project. He and his wife Robin have decided they need to focus on existing businesses and try to get employees back to work and those businesses running again before they could think about anything else. Certainly something of the magnitude this is. But I think that there's, in terms of, he put a huge amount into design and thinking about what that site could become that would certainly be useful perhaps to someone in the future should they choose to work with him in terms of acquiring the design or whatever.
But I mean, the city has a contract with him to perform certain things. And is he interested in performing it? Is he interested in hanging on to that contract until the city says, let's cancel it? Or does he want to abandon it now? I mean, what's that situation?
Well, again,
Ellen, you know?
I have, yeah, Ellen has actually spoken with Nick. I haven't talked to him. So my understanding is that he does not want to be a developer of that site right now. I don't think I think that however, rather than start in everything all over again, maybe we ought to just sort of see how things play out here in the short term to see if we can find a better way forward than starting all over again at ground zero. Which we need to do.
I can jump in, but Nancy had her hand up, so.
Well, this is on a different subject, so why don't we finish up on, I mean, related, but not
Okay.
the drift.
Sure. I mean, I've talked with Nick a couple of times. The mayor's talked with him obviously more extensively than I have. I don't think there's a whole lot of urgency about voiding or doing anything with contracts in anybody's mind right now. As Chris alluded to, it really would, from my perspective, what makes sense is to see how this moves forward. Not in terms of Nick and Robin's interest in being developers on the Riverfront Triangle or the Fox site, because I think, it's clear to them and to me that they've got their hands full with Logjam Productions to figure. But should someone come along who wants to develop that property, it would seem that an assignment of their rights to that entity is a far easier thing, as Chris said, than starting over, much like Hotel Fox Partners assigned their development rights to Nick, last year. So I don't think anybody is pushing right now to void or modify legal agreements, but rather to try to be a little bit patient and see what the future holds and what's out there. At this point, I don't know that we know what the future holds in terms of another hotel in downtown, in terms of the entertainment business, in terms of the conference business. Those are all the components that he was going to undertake with that property. The only one that I think is pretty secure would be housing on top, because there seems to be a need for every strata of housing in this city. I don't care whether it's the lowest end or the highest end, but you got to have something to put it on top of. And is that a hotel or, so I think, we're fortunate, I believe, to be in a position to be patient right now and see what the future holds and see who steps forward that might have an interest in doing something with that property.
I guess our patience really only can extend for the next 2 months, right? I mean, in order to extend the deadline, we need to have a party to whom we are extending that deadline. And so I'm all for remaining patient and being hopeful that in the next 2 months, someone steps forward that might be willing to step into the development shoes as they currently exist. But I do not think that we can unilaterally extend the deadline for that contract when we know that the person on the other side of that contract is not interested in proceeding.
Yeah, and I think as we get closer to the end of November, we need to think about it. We need to have conversations with Nick. We need to have conversations with the city administration, et cetera, and decide what is the best route forward. And we may be looking at doing something at an October board meeting and possibly even November board meeting. But we need a clearer path, I think, than we have today. I wouldn't want to pitch the whole thing in the river, no pun intended, and have to start over.
Well, okay, that makes sense. My concern is that we have a very extensive contract for a very specific purpose with very specific deadlines with a specific person who's no longer interested in doing that. And let me just say that is about the most understandable thing that's happened in COVID is that the Chakotas chose not to do this. There's no fault on their part or anything. I mean, it's just, you know, I guess that's what happened. But I think if the city's going to be in a position to where we have to start doing this again, my own view is that the city would be in a stronger position if it didn't have contractual relationships hanging out there. And if somebody says, yeah, I want to step in and do what Chakota did because I think the world's going to come back to normal instantaneously, et cetera, we've got the model for what we're willing to do. We don't have to start all over again from the standpoint of, you know, figuring out what all the issues are and all of that. But, you know, being flexible for a while makes some sense, but I think sooner rather than later, we need to have serious conversations with him to find out, with Chakotas to find out if they're really, you know, if this is their final decision for now, then let's end the relationship and get the piece of property back in the city's hands without any clouds or whatever you want to call it, or what the city might be able to do with it.
Well, did Hotel Fox Partners retain rights on the west end of the property to develop residential high rises there?
In fact, their successor, Riverfront Triangle Partners, owns the former Western Montana Clinic property along the riverfront and the hospital and clinic property north of Front Street, between Front Street and Broadway. So yes, they have actually moved forward with a lot of planning. They too, in February and March, were very close to coming up with a solid residential commercial plan. They'd worked with a group out of Seattle to do some planning and design that was really very creative and pretty neat stuff. They were to the point where they were going to start reaching out for equity financing and so on for that. That has obviously been put on hold like everything. They have received other, as Grant was mentioning, they have also received interest from folks from out of state in maybe pushing that project forward. So I think there's interest, and yes, they are moving ahead. It looks like, as you probably saw in the news, that the project that we thought was the tail of the project may actually be the nose, and that's at the 601 West Broadway site where Tiorama was for many, many years. It's been a vacant lot for the last probably 7 or 8 years. That may change hands and has just been recently rezoned for a fairly substantial, a very substantial residential building. So I think that may keep that interest alive in that area and show the kinds of things that may be able to happen down there. If you haven't seen that, you can pick it up on the news or whatever on the internet. I think that it looks like a very well-designed proposal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? We were only one pandemic away from getting it done, huh?
Minor details, Carl.
We were on the way, and the only thing that could stop us was a pandemic.
And I was totally willing to join that working committee too, for the record. Now that it's not working. Good joke, right?
Used to that, I ought to move on. I think that given the things you're talking about, though, we'll try to have a memo put together for you or some sort of a short presentation by either the next meeting, or if that it's not possible, the one following, certainly on where we stand. We'll make sure that we've had the city attorney and perhaps our consultant attorneys take a look at where we're at, and so that we're able to present you with a good concrete base for where we're at and where we think we can go.
Well, and I know it goes without saying, but I would also assume you run that by the Dakotas, because if it's
Absolutely, they're going to be.
something,
That'll be the start.
I would still love the opportunity to work with them. Because that was quite the vision and would have been cool. All right, anything else on the director's report? If not, then we'll switch here. Going to my agenda, budget reports. Jill, that's why you showed up all of a sudden.
Hey, everybody hear me? So we have two sets of budget reports. The first set is your fiscal year 20 year end. Sorry, looking at the reports. Let me see if I can share screen and we can look at them that way. Okay. That's not the one I want. So I don't know if we want to go through every single report in detail. I'm happy to answer any questions and we can look at specifics. I do want to point out, as I did in my email, that there are still some taxes yet to be received. We, in the accrual basis of accounting, we accrue the first 75 days. So July and August taxes get accrued back. And so we're still waiting to get that report from the county and have it posted by the city. And that affects, our final revenue, which, that's this number up here, how much is remaining out there. So this is ERD2, and you see what 90% of collection.
Jill, excuse me. I don't know about anybody else. What I'm looking at is
Yeah, the only thing you've got up is the public comment stuff.
All right, let's see.
your budget reports up.
It showed up for me and it showed up on MCAT. How about now?
You're good.
No?
Yes. We're looking at FY20 ERD2.
Yeah, but it's not showing up on MCAT. So let me try something different here. Now, what do you see?
FY20 ERD2. Now we see nothing.
Now now everybody can see that. It's up on MCAT feed, and if you can see that. So FY20 year 2.
Went away on my screen, Jill. I don't know about anybody. There's a weird thing. It blocked. There we go. It's back.
How about now?
Good. Gone.
Good grief.
Yeah. I love technology.
Love it. It just takes a little bit, a lot of troubleshooting. So that's the thing I wanted to point out, is this, just kind of keep an eye on this number. And there's a couple more things that need to be posted on the city side for FY20 to wrap that up. So just any questions on any of the districts in FY20? Did you want me to go through any of those in detail?
Your visual is not there. So just so you know. Or if somebody else has it, say, speak up, because I don't.
We don't have it.
Okay. We got a black screen with a white line down the middle.
Right now it says screen sharing is paused, but it's up on the MCAT feed. That's interesting.
So Jill, can I ask a quick question, Chairman?
Yep.
So do we think by next month we have a better idea about the taxable? I think you said this in your email, but what's the timeline like before we have a good solid picture of things?
Let me try this one more time. So good
Or-
question.
no,
So the
that's-
timeline on we should see the tax receipts from the county by next month. And hopefully, so right now the city is busy doing their year-end journal vouchers and things like that. They're doing their year-end entries. And so hopefully MRAs will be posted by next month also. So as far as the rainbow report goes for the FY20, we should be pretty close to solid. Obviously, it's not audited yet, but pretty comfortable with where we ended the fiscal year. As far as the budget goes, we still will not have final mill levies from the taxing jurisdictions. We usually don't get those until October, mid to late October sometimes. And that's not, usually they're done because they have to send the tax bills out, but just the timing of them getting me that report. So I'm sure they have those completed end of September, early October, because they need to, send those tax bills out for November. But so that's kind of two parts to that as far as the new rainbow reports. Has anybody seen the rainbow report now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Maybe it's when I switch between reports. I don't know. Does that answer your question, Mel?
Yes, thank you.
And are we seeing the agenda?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yes.
Let's look at Front Street. So this is, Front Street and Riverfront Triangle are going to be a little bit lower on the receipts because we had those new bonds. And when those bonds came in, then you have to load those debt service accounts. We had to have enough money in there transferred over to make the first debt service payment. And then you want to have those filled up. So we have a little bit of a cushion. The bond covenants require that the language is such that when the debt service account is emptied, at that point it triggers, if it's empty, then it triggers to be refilled again. And that's how it's worded appropriately. So typically since we get a large portion of our tax receipts at the end, we have it split in the fiscal year, but a lot of, then our last receipts come in June. Well, at the beginning of June, those funds are cleared out of those debt service accounts. So it's a good opportunity right there to fill those accounts for the next debt service payment. And so that's kind of what you're seeing in those two districts, because some of that revenue has been transferred over to the debt service clearing accounts for the two new bond issues for Stockman Bank and the Merck. So North Reserve Scott Street, we've got good receipts there. Oh, looks like I need to add a percentage on Hellgate. Oh, that's a new report. That one's misposted, or did I hit the wrong one? There we go. So good receipts on Hellgate. Any questions on FY20? Anything you want me to go over or leave up on the screen or look at in more detail? Okay.
Anything from anybody? Okay.
So moving on to our FY21. In my email, when I posted these up, just want to make note of a few things. So then, as you can see, these beginning fund balances, I'm noting here that they're not final. This is what we estimate. We estimate these numbers early on, May time frame. And so I've adjusted them to kind of where I think we are now based on how projects turned out, whether they were more expenditures were made on those projects or less expenditures were made on those projects. We also had, a couple things that affect these beginning fund balances. And I'll read from my email. Lower tax receipts in FY20. So if we had lower tax receipts in FY20, then of course these beginning fund balances are going to be different. They're going to be lower. We also do annually an internal administrative transfer, which is done from the other districts to ERD3 to provide their proportionate share of the operating expenses of the agency. So that includes our salaries, personnel, supplies, things like that come on the admin side that have to do with the operations of the agency. And so those projects that are worked on by the staff during the year are tracked by hours hours that the staff spends on the projects. And there's a quite elaborate spreadsheet that tracks all of those throughout the year through our time accounting. And then at the end of the year, then I true up, what the other districts owe ERD3 to help pay for those annual costs. Now, what happens when a new district comes into existence is that there is no money there to pay for those costs that are staff time spent in those districts. So for several years, we, usually end up tracking those new districts and waiting for the time when they are redeveloped to a point where there's adequate tax increment revenue to reimburse ERD3. And we track that obviously on an annual basis. This year, I was able to true up a majority of those districts with ERD3 and bring them current. What we anticipate spending in each district is, kind of an unknown at the beginning of the year when we do the estimates. For several years, we did not have a lot of activity in ERD2 because we had some large large bonds and projects that were out there. So we had substantial debt service payments that we were paying. And so there was some time that needed to be, we needed to wait a little bit before there was adequate revenue to take on additional projects. And so now we're seeing more staff time spent in ERD2. So that's one of the reasons why you could see a lower beginning fund balance in some of these other districts, because that administrative transfer was larger. So let's go back since I'm on this topic. And let's look at ERD2. Because ERD2 had a lot of activity this year, and we had only anticipated 150,000 would be transferred, which was consistent with the prior years. But this is the number that we ended up having to transfer to reimburse ERD3. And so that, you're going to see then a lower fund balance because that transfer was higher from ERD2 than anticipated in our budget. And looking at this going forward, and I mentioned it to Ellen already, when I did the reconciliation, my recommendation would be when when you look at the budget again in October, when we get the final mill levies, we look at increasing, you really look at those numbers a little bit more closely and our overall administrative budget, and probably, we're going to need to increase ERD2 because when the budget was submitted, I think I just kept that number the same. So that'll be something that comes before you. So as you can see, I've loaded everything in here, all the projects that were carryover. Blackfoot, we just recently paid them out and they're complete. This number here for the sidewalks, at the time I was creating this report, I didn't have the breakdown, and Todd has sent me that breakdown of the estimates on this Inez First and Second Street project. So those will be numbers that can be plugged in there as far as the budget, and it'll break out of that 450. So we come down here to our contingency number. And if you recall, we are running into a situation where there are tax appeals after we have a valuation year, and those affect our overall contingency because those tax appeals, we don't see those when they give us the taxable values, they come subsequent to that. So I need to follow up with the Department of Revenue. We had our meeting with them and we got a lot of information and found that most of the decreases in our taxable value in the districts was a result of those appeals. And I know that there were a few outstanding ones when we had our meeting that weren't settled yet. So anyway, that number still needs to be put in here. It's blank, and this date from last year was October. And so hopefully I'll have kind of a finalized number of what we need to back out on that contingency number because of the appeals in each district for you in October. So I also mentioned in my email that the notes receivable is something that's, that affects our budget when we look at it in the Rainbow report, this presentation. In our budget document, it's just a sources and uses presentation, and we have, here's our revenue and here are our expenditures. And the agency has always budgeted all of the capacity of the sources. And if there is excess capacity, then that those funds are put into a contingency line item. These line items right here. But what is happening that I see is that because of the presentation we're using on the budget side that you see that makes the most sense for us to understand it, and it's not just a spreadsheet full of numbers, it doesn't allow for us to show this receivable amount right here. And in NERD 2, it's quite substantial. So you see, you think you have 1.2 million of contingency when in actuality you don't. So I think on the budget side, if you recall the presentation that we used when we look at the budget, and I attached it to our agenda here so you could see this is what you approved last month. I'm thinking this is just Riverfront Triangle, but as an example, do you see this projected year-end cash on hand? I think right here, that's kind of misnamed. It's not actually going to be cash, but I think I can, change that name a little bit and just say, excess funds and like notes receivable. My recommendation is that we leave that there on the districts that have those notes receivable in them. ERD 2 and ERD 3, I think, are the only ones that have any of those notes. Just so it backs out our expenditure number, so you don't think that that money is readily available on the budget presentation. Because when you're looking at this, you might see a large contingency amount, and in actuality, that's not really what you have. So that would be my recommendation for our next presentation of the budget. Any questions on ERD 2 for FY20 on this report? And like I told Nancy in the email, they're all manually done. So eyes on them is really appreciated from my perspective. There are things that I miss because like I said, it's a lot of manual entry. So it becomes a presentation that works for us. And so if you see something that looks off or it's a typo or I didn't get a date changed or a fiscal year, I appreciate any feedback you have.
Anything from anybody? Okay.
All right, we'll go to ERD 3. Again, here I kept this revenue estimate the same. I didn't see really any substantial changes for that. This was the first district I did though, so the other ones I dug a little bit deeper and tried to get as close as I could on the adjusted beginning fund balance. As all of you know, I coach skating, so I'm at the rink a lot. And the trails, they're working on the trails. I know they just finished the section coming off of Russell Street that was closed for several weeks. I don't know if Ellen has an anticipated date when those will be done, but that's a bond issue that we have pending. So ERD 3 is looking good as far as contingency on uncommitted funds. Here is that 220 for our notes receivable, which includes the mountain water notes and the facade improvement program. This is higher for this fiscal year because of the trailhead project that we did. Any questions on ERD 3?
Questions? Okay.
Okay. Here we have Front Street. Looking better than what I anticipated as far as beginning fund balance. So hopefully when the auditors get in there that there won't be any adjustments, anything I missed. As you can see, that again, the black column is what we submit originally for the budget. Your first, the most recent presentation I was able to, we approved that most recent presentation as of August before the city adopted their budget. So these numbers should go in there other than slight changes to the contingency if there is any based on, our beginning fund balance, which obviously those have to be entered into the system. Because I anticipate a little bit higher of a beginning fund balance, I was able to put more of the committed funds to the Wren Hotel in there. Looks like I was able to put all of them for the adjusted budget column and then drop the excess down under contingency. Again, these are not final, they're estimates. But otherwise, Front Street, you know, budgeted with no contingency. And I know there are going to be appeals, so there will be a number in this line right here.
Questions? Okay.
Riverfront Triangle, this is where you're going to see that adjusted fund balance for the debt service. And also Riverfront Triangle, again, let's see if it was having to do with the admin transfer. Let's go back and just look at that really quick. So that one was good. So we anticipate, I budgeted for $100,000 and we moved that over.
Okay.
So Riverfront Triangle has just anticipated same amount for admin transfer, no projects. And here's your contingency number. Also, when I'm looking at these reports, here's your contingency, but here is your current fund balance. So depending on, you know, what kind of project we're doing and the timing of it. And we're in a pandemic, so I was trying to be really sensitive to our potential tax receipts going forward.
Okay.
North Reserve Scott Street, we have just a small adjustment to the anticipated beginning fund balance. Administrative transfers. Again, if we're going to be spending a lot of time in North Reserve Scott Street working on the Scott Street property plan, you know, this number might not be sufficient, but you know, at the beginning of the year, it's hard to know what we're really going to end up spending as far as staff time. So we might look at this number being adjusted. This is our Scott Street Village Phase 2 and 3. This is the remaining debt service that we had in there for public improvements. And as you recall, we thought we were going to be able to incorporate these funds into the Villaggio project as part of their commitment of TIF funds for the public improvements related to that project. But there is a deadline for us to use these funds, and I don't think the Villaggio project is going to be able to meet that deadline. I believe it was December. And so we're going to have to move these funds into debt service to use for the next bond payment or payments. It's a wash ultimately, because that just means less debt tax increment revenue needs to go into the debt service account, and it would just go into our development account. But I wanted to point that out, that that's what that is.
Okay.
Here's your contingency amount. There is a note receivable in Riverfront. Excuse me, North Reserve. I think that's the Brett's project. And so there's your adjusted contingency.
Okay. Unless there are questions.
One more final question. Here's our Hellgate district. Really similar amounts of anticipated fund balance, beginning transfers. For some reason, I missed this project, this railroad quiet zone. It had already been approved, but it didn't. I missed it on the budget presentation for you in August. So that will, but it's here under the adjusted column. So it's still in there. Here's your contingency. And then here's your fund balance. And that's all I have, other than answering any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? Thank you again, Jill. Anything further from anyone? I don't know of anything. If not, thank you all. We set for a regular time for October?
We'll let you know. They're working on some audio stuff, but the equipment has been installed. I got 2 emails earlier today, one from Carl saying, yeah, I think we can plan on it. And then one from somebody in his department saying, well, not so fast.
Okay.
But we'll let you know. Hopefully we can go back to our regular third Thursday meeting and operate out of the Hal Fraser.
Okay. Well, it was nice to see everybody, even if that's all we could do today. But thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks.
Stay healthy.
Appreciate your time and your good thoughts.
Bye now.
Everybody,
Thank you.
great
Thank
day.
you.